The coffee in Dr. Gregory Pierce's mug didn't just tremble. It leapt violently over the rim, splashing onto his immaculate white coat. The low-frequency rumble shook the ICU windows, more a punch to the chest than mere sound. Monitors blinked erratically, papers flew across the nurses' station, and chaos erupted in every corner. This was no ordinary medical transport. The deafening whump-whump of massive rotors overpowered every alarm. Outside, blinding floodlights tore through the rain, revealing a helipad shredded by unauthorized landing gear. A matte black Sikorsky A-60 Blackhawk, unmarked and menacing, hovered above. The side doors slid open, and 6 fully armed figures fast-roped to the roof with lethal precision. Dr. Pierce froze, heart sinking. The frantic woman in bed 4 wasn't having a panic attack. She was the most important person in the hospital, and he had just signed his own professional death warrant. The night had settled over St. Jude's Medical Center like a heavy blanket, yet the calm was deceiving. Inside the ER, fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows across the sterile linoleum floors. Sarah adjusted her scrubs and checked her watch, a habit drilled into her from years of military operations. Every second felt amplified, as though time itself had grown heavier in anticipation of the storm she couldn't yet see. Outside, the wail of sirens cut through the cold air. Black Hawk helicopters churned the night sky, their rotors slicing the darkness into rhythmic chaos. Sarah's heart rate quickened, not from fear, but from the eerie familiarity of controlled urgency. She had been through missions that tested the very limits of human endurance, and yet nothing had prepared her for the silent storm brewing in this hospital. Dr. Pierce, the ER's resident authority, paced behind the triage desk. His brow furrowed as he reviewed charts and murmured updates into his headset. He looked every bit the composed professional, but Sarah could see the tremor in his fingers, the slight hitch in his posture. Hospitals had their own pulse, their own rhythm, and tonight something had shifted, a tremor before the storm. Sarah's eyes scanned the room. Nurses moved with mechanical precision, unaware of the threads of danger winding through the corridors. Monitors beeped steadily, masking the subtle anomalies in vital signs. One patient, a young boy with a fractured wrist, whimpered softly. Another, an elderly man, coughed, oblivious to the coming chaos. The contrast between life continuing normally and the approaching storm made the tension almost unbearable. Her own phone buzzed, a low, deliberate vibration. She knew the tone well, military-grade, encrypted and urgent. She slipped it from the waistband of her scrubs, noting the message from General Davidson: extraction protocol initiated. Status critical. Stand by. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She was on civilian soil, yet the rules of engagement still applied. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the lives in her immediate care could spiral into catastrophe. The distant rotor blades grew louder. Through the ER's large front windows, shadows flickered, fast, sharp, deliberate. Sarah's instincts screamed. She wasn't just a nurse tonight. She was the first line of defense, a silent sentinel amidst chaos she could almost taste. Dr. Pierce finally turned to her, voice clipped. "We need that patient stabilized. Now." His words were professional, but beneath them lingered a tension that Sarah had come to recognize as fear. Fear that the coming storm would expose inadequacies he couldn't admit. Sarah nodded once, her mind moving faster than any civilian could follow. She moved through the ER with surgical precision, checking monitors, adjusting 4S, and briefing Chloe, her youngest charge in the unit. Every movement was calculated. Every decision is critical. The storm wasn't coming. It was here, manifesting first in nerves and subtle vibrations, then in the distant growing roar of rotor blades that would soon dominate the sky. Outside, the first Black Hawk descended into the hospital's helipad, sending a rush of wind through the doors and scattering papers like leaves in a violent autumn gale. Inside, time seemed to split, measured not in seconds but in heartbeats, each one echoing the inevitability of what was coming. Sarah took a deep breath. She didn't yet know the full scope of the danger, but she knew her role. She had always known. And when the storm hit, she would be ready. The hospital's corridors were deceptively quiet. Every footstep, every muted conversation felt amplified in the sterile emptiness. Sarah moved through them with the awareness of someone trained to notice anomalies, the subtle misalignments in a system that appeared orderly to the untrained eye. Something was off, though she couldn't yet put her finger on it. The first sign came as a subtle vibration beneath her feet, a low hum that seemed almost internal. She paused, glancing at the ceiling tiles as if they might reveal the source. Nothing. Yet, the sensation lingered, like the whisper of a storm far beyond the horizon, and it set her senses on high alert. Chloe, her young charge, trailed close behind, her eyes wide. "What is it?" she whispered, clutching her clipboard tightly. "Stay focused," Sarah said softly, masking the tension in her own voice. "Something's coming. We just need to be ready." In the ER control room, Dr. Pierce was scanning the monitors with a precision that betrayed his worry. Each screen displayed vital signs, alarms, and patient statuses, yet he seemed to see beyond the data, anticipating the cascade of events that was about to unfold. The monitors remained steady, but Sarah knew better. Technology could only predict so much. It couldn't account for human error or the sudden intrusion of forces outside normal parameters. Then the silent alarm triggered, not a blaring siren, not a flashing red light, just a soft, barely audible ping, repeated in a pattern too deliberate to be accidental. Sarah recognized it immediately. A signal embedded in the hospital's system for critical emergencies, used only in the highest level contingencies. Her heart quickened. She didn't need confirmation. Instinct told her the alert wasn't for an internal mishap or a medical emergency. It was for something else, something precise, something dangerous. The distant roar of helicopters grew, harmonizing with the hospital's natural hum, creating a dissonance that made the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Shadows flickered against the walls as the rotor's rhythm resonated through the building. Sarah's mind raced through scenarios, calculating every possible outcome with military precision. Chloe hesitated at a junction, her face pale. "Should we evacuate?" she asked, voice barely audible. "No," Sarah replied, her tone firm. "We stabilize. We wait for instructions. Panicking now is the fastest way to fail." Her words were calm, but internally, every fiber of her being was tensed, coiled, ready to spring into action. The first wave of operatives entered through the side entrance. They were clad in tactical gear, movements silent, deliberate. Sarah caught only glimpses, black silhouettes against the dim emergency lighting. But the presence was unmistakable. She recognized the insignia, Navy SEALs, the elite, silent, precise. They were here for her, and they weren't here for small talk. Dr. Pierce's face paled as the team moved past him, nodding briefly in acknowledgement but showing no resistance. In that instant, the hierarchy of the hospital's command dissolved, replaced by a more urgent order: survival, discretion, and action. Sarah's phone buzzed again, the encrypted alert flashing. "Stand by. Extraction team in place. Protect the civilians. Follow protocol." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was no longer a shift. This was a battlefield disguised as a hospital. Every patient, every nurse, every piece of equipment became part of a larger equation she had to solve in real time. She moved quickly, efficiently, her actions precise and rehearsed. yet driven by the raw immediacy of the moment. The silent alarm had sounded, and it had demanded one thing above all: readiness. Outside, the helicopters circled higher, their rotors cutting through the cold night air. The first SEAL secured the perimeter, moving with a precision that left no margin for error. Inside, Sarah and Chloe readied themselves, each aware that the calm of the hospital was nothing more than a fragile veneer. The storm was not coming. It had already begun. Sarah exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The silent alarm had been triggered. The team was in position and every second counted. She glanced around the ER, her eyes meeting those of her colleagues. Fear was there, yes, but beneath it, a determination that mirrored her own. They would survive this night. They had to. Dr. Pierce's office smelled of antiseptic and authority. The man perched behind his polished mahogany desk radiated a confidence bordering on arrogance, one earned from decades of surgical triumphs and reinforced by the hierarchy of the hospital. Yet Sarah didn't flinch. She had spent years navigating crises where confidence meant nothing if skill didn't follow. "You're overstepping, Sarah," Dr. Pierce said, his eyes narrowing. The lines around his mouth deepened, as if etched by years of asserting control. "This is my department, my rules. Your little trauma nurse instincts won't override decades of experience." Sarah's jaw tightened. She could feel the tension in the air, coiling like a spring ready to snap. "I am not overstepping," she replied evenly. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had been in the thick of life and death decisions countless times. "I am identifying the patient's immediate risk. Cardiac tamponade does not wait for your schedule." Pierce leaned back, hands clasped behind his head, the picture of casual disdain. "Cardiac what now?" he asked, almost mockingly. "Do you even understand the ramifications of calling for a code outside my approval?" Sarah's eyes did not waver. "I do. That's why I'm taking action. Protocol allows for immediate intervention when a patient's life is at risk. I am following it." The air seemed to thicken. Chloe, standing near the doorway, glanced between them, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her notes. The young nurse had been taught to follow chain of command, to respect authority unquestioningly. But here, authority was irrelevant to survival. Pierce's voice hardened. "You will not undermine me. If you insist on defying my directive, sedation may become necessary, for your own safety and the patient's." Sarah felt a cold rush, the threat landing with the weight of reality. Sedation. In this environment it wasn't idle talk, but the adrenaline pumping through her veins sharpened her resolve rather than dulling it. "Try it," she said, her tone unwavering. "I've faced worse. I've saved lives under fire. I am not your subordinate in matters of trauma care." The room fell silent. Chloe's hesitation was palpable, her youth and inexperience making her the human fulcrum between Pierce's authority and Sarah's defiance. She opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing that words alone could not tip the scale of what was unfolding. Pierce's eyes flickered with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. "You're reckless," he muttered. "A trauma nurse? You fancy yourself a savior?" "I am a trauma nurse," Sarah replied. "I respond when others hesitate. I act when time is measured in heartbeats. Right now there is no waiting. There is no protocol that protects indecision." Her gaze swept the office, landing on the patient chart lying open on the desk. The figures screamed danger, rising jugular vein pressure, muffled heart sounds, hypotension, a classic triad she had memorized in her residency. Every second wasted was a second closer to irreversible collapse. Pierce's chest tightened. He knew she was right, yet his pride, a lifetime of authority and recognition, made compliance bitter. The clock ticked audibly in the back of her mind. each beat a reminder that this confrontation was no longer about ego, it was about survival. Chloe finally stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "We don't have time," she said. "Sarah's right. We need to stabilize him before it's too late." Pierce's hands shook imperceptibly. The silence was suffocating, punctuated only by the faint beeping of monitors outside the office. The power dynamics had shifted, and for once, his authority was secondary to expertise, to life itself. Sarah exhaled slowly, feeling the tension ease just enough to act. She moved toward the patient, Chloe following. The threat of sedation lingered, but the immediacy of cardiac tamponade demanded defiance. Every second counted, and in this war between pride and life-saving instinct, Sarah knew she had already made her choice. Sarah's hand hovered over the small, unassuming box tucked in the top drawer of her office. The object inside seemed out of place amidst the polished monitors and sterile paperwork, an old military-grade flip phone, its casing scratched and worn from years of field use. It had been a relic from another life, one she had tried to leave behind when she traded combat zones for hospital corridors. Yet now it called to her, a tool whose time had come. She flipped it open, the hinge stiff but reliable, and the screen blinked to life. The phone carried a signal strong enough to pierce the city's concrete confines, connecting her instantly to a network few could access. It was designed for situations like this, where conventional lines failed, where lives hung in the balance, and authority alone could not dictate outcomes. Sarah dialed a pre-programmed number. The screen displayed a series of cryptic verification codes. Each entry demanded precision. One misstep and the connection would fail. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency, recalling sequences drilled into her memory during long nights of covert exercises. "Davidson," she said once the call connected, voice low but urgent. "It's Sarah. We have a critical patient, cardiac tamponade. I need tactical support." A pause. Then from the other end came the unmistakable resonance of authority. "Sarah." "Iron Mike, I read you." The voice was gruff, layered with decades of battlefield experience, carrying a weight that no civilian command could ever replicate. Every word conveyed assurance, discipline, and an expectation that her next steps would be precise and decisive. "Authentication?" Sarah asked, knowing this ritual was as much about establishing trust as securing the line. "Standard procedure," Davidson replied. His tone left no room for hesitation. She entered the secondary codes, sequences memorized like muscle memory. The phone hummed softly, then confirmed, authentication complete. "Coordinates?" she asked, already scanning the patient charts, vital signs, and available resources. "Stand by," Davidson replied. "We're overlaying tactical support. You're in position, your priority is stabilization. We'll guide remotely." The words carried more than direction. They conveyed reassurance and the invisible presence of a military command structure beyond the walls of the hospital. Sarah felt the weight of that presence, knowing she was no longer isolated in her decision-making. Though physically alone, the expertise of seasoned strategists and medics hovered through the small device in her hand, ready to guide, correct, and reinforce every action. She briefed Chloe in terse, clipped sentences. "Follow my instructions exactly. We have a window of minutes. Cardiac tamponade will not wait." Chloe nodded, eyes wide but resolute. The gravity of the situation settled on both women, the military presence amplifying the stakes of an already critical medical emergency. Davidson's voice cut in again, calm but commanding. "Inject pericardiocentesis kit. Angle at 30 degrees. Monitor pressure. Do not exceed 200 milliliters without reporting." Each instruction was precise, devoid of hesitation or embellishment, the sort of direction born from repeated high-stakes operations. Sarah followed, moving with a blend of surgical precision and battlefield urgency. As she worked, the old flip phone rested beside the patient chart like a lifeline. Every beep, every coded acknowledgement from Davidson reinforced the unseen network supporting her actions. It was a paradox, a relic from a past life, yet the most current and vital tool she possessed. Through that small device, she could coordinate, adapt, and execute interventions that could mean the difference between survival and collapse. The stakes were clear. This was no ordinary trauma scenario. Lives depended on her speed, judgment, and the seamless integration of civilian skill with military precision. And as the phone relayed the next set of instructions, Sarah realized the surreal reality she now navigated: a battlefield, a hospital room, and the fragile line between life and death, all converging under her hands. Every second counted, every choice mattered, and somewhere beyond the city, Iron Mike monitored, the invisible hand of command steadying her in a storm of adrenaline and urgency. The faint thrum of rotors grew louder, vibrating through the concrete and steel of the hospital. Sarah barely had time to glance at the clock before a shadow passed across the ceiling, then another. Outside, the night sky was fractured by the ominous silhouette of a Black Hawk, descending with surgical precision onto the hospital's rooftop. Its landing skids screamed against the metal platform, sending a gust of wind and dust into the hallways below. Inside the emergency wing, tension crackled like static. Dr. Pierce's arrogance faltered as the first tactical operators, dressed in full Spectre black, faces obscured by visors, slid through the entrance. Their movements were fluid, rehearsed, and absolute. Weapons were secured but ready. Every gesture communicated control. The team's presence transformed the sterile hospital floor into an instant command zone. Secure the perimeter. A low, modulated voice commanded through comms. Sergeant Miller's tone cut through the chaos like a scalpel. He was a PJ, a combat medic, and operator rolled into one lethal package. Every step he took radiated authority, the sort earned in environments where hesitation meant death. Sarah felt the relief wash over her in waves. The cardiac tamponade patient, Chloe's trembling hands, Dr. Pierce's tension, all of it now under the watchful eyes of men trained to stabilize chaos. Miller moved to the patient without hesitation. His hands were steady, methodical, reassessing the pericardiocentesis site with exacting precision. "How's the pressure?" he asked, scanning the monitors like a seasoned strategist evaluating a battlefield. "Stable," Sarah replied, her voice tight with residual adrenaline. "But only just. We need to maintain vigilance." Miller nodded once, then began adjustments that brought the patient into a near-immediate equilibrium. Every syringe, clamp, and tubing adjustment was executed with military exactitude. Sarah followed his lead, marveling at the synchrony, the choreography of life-saving skill honed in far deadlier theaters. Dr. Pierce stumbled back, eyes wide, mouth agape. His attempts at authority evaporated in the presence of these operators. He opened his mouth to protest, but Miller's gaze pinned him like a spotlight. "Step aside," Miller said quietly. The simplicity of the command carried weight heavier than any argument Pierce could muster. Meanwhile, the rest of the Spectre team swept through the hospital wing. They moved silently, clearing rooms, securing hallways, and establishing control points. Each operator's presence was a silent assertion. This was no ordinary emergency. This was a full tactical takeover, executed with precision that blurred the line between military operation and cinematic spectacle. Sarah observed the scene, her mind racing but composed. The Black Hawk's rotors continued to echo above, a rhythmic reminder that extraction and evacuation were never far from consideration. The operators coordinated through whispers and hand signals, every movement calculated, leaving no room for error. Chloe, still clutching a tray of medical supplies, watched the team with wide eyes. Miller caught her gaze and gave a nod, a quiet reassurance. "You're doing fine. Keep following instructions." The statement, simple as it was, steadied her trembling hands. Dr. Pierce, meanwhile, was rendered irrelevant. His arrogance and self-importance were stripped away by the sheer professionalism and authority of the ghost team. Every decision, every action was now in the hands of operators who dealt in survival at its most uncompromising level. Sarah felt a momentary surge of clarity. With Miller and the team in full command, the patient was not just stabilized, she was witnessing the convergence of military precision and medical urgency. The hospital's ordinary chaos had transformed into a controlled theater, every second choreographed to maximize efficiency and minimize risk. Outside, the Black Hawk completed its hover, ready for rapid extraction. Inside, the ghost team secured the final corridor. Sarah allowed herself a single exhale, the kind that came only after total control had been regained. The tension lingered, but it was now structured, measurable, and actionable. Dr. Pierce, still reeling, could do nothing but watch as professionals operated above and beyond his comprehension. Sarah and Chloe exchanged a brief glance, understanding without words the ghost team had arrived, and survival was no longer a gamble. It was a calculated certainty. The hum of the Black Hawk faded into the background, replaced by the sterile beeping of monitors and the low murmurs of the ghost team. Sarah's gaze was fixed on the patient's chart, her mind racing as she cross-referenced vital signs with lab results. Something wasn't right. The sudden cardiac instability wasn't accidental, it was chemical. A faint tremor ran through Chloe's hands as she hovered nearby. "What is it?" she asked, voice tight. Sarah inhaled sharply. "It's a binary compound, highly volatile. One part of this toxin alone isn't fatal, but combined with the other, it's designed to collapse the cardiovascular system within minutes. Cardiac tamponade is just the first stage." Dr. Pierce, still struggling to reclaim some shred of authority, leaned over. "How do you know this?" he asked, a mixture of skepticism and fear lacing his tone. Sarah's eyes locked on him, steady and unflinching. "Because I've seen this before. Project Chimera. It's a covert bioweapons program the military shut down years ago, but this is a live test. And somehow we're the guinea pigs." The room went silent for a heartbeat, the weight of her words settling like a stone. Miller's jaw tightened as he processed the revelation, scanning the monitors and the surrounding hospital for potential threats. The operator's training kicked in instantly, every exit, every potential ambush point, logged and secured in seconds. Sarah continued, her voice low but urgent. "The compound has two components. One was introduced via intravenous fluids, engineered to look like a routine medication. The second is environmental, airborne. That's why rapid extraction is critical. We can't treat the symptoms alone. We need containment, quarantine, and full decontamination." Chloe swallowed hard, her youthful face pale. "St. Jude's?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed, tapping the military-grade flip phone she had retrieved earlier. "It's not just a hospital, it's a controlled facility with full isolation protocols. Extraction there gives us the only real chance at survival. Anything else is too risky." Dr. Pierce's eyes darted nervously toward the door, now guarded by two silent Spectre operators. He could no longer dictate the pace or the method. The weight of the military presence rendered him irrelevant, a fact that made him tremble more than the toxin ever could. Outside, the night was still, but Sarah's mind raced ahead, calculating every variable. The ghost team coordinated silently through earpieces, every move precise, every operator a cog in a machine designed for maximum efficiency under extreme conditions. Their awareness extended beyond the hospital walls. Street exits, emergency stairs, potential surveillance points, all mapped in real time. Sarah glanced at the monitors again. Her patient's condition was stabilizing, but only temporarily. The binary compound was a ticking clock. Each second wasted, each hesitation brought the poison closer to completing its deadly equation. Miller crouched beside her, scanning the vital signs. "You've handled worse," he muttered, a rare note of reassurance. "But this is different. Extraction has to happen now." Sarah nodded, her mind calculating contingencies. Project Chimera was not a distant memory. It was a living threat, and every person in the hospital was unknowingly entangled. The covert nature of the operation, the sabotage embedded in what should have been routine medical care, transformed a standard emergency into a battlefield. Dr. Pierce swallowed hard, trying to form words, but Sarah's calm certainty overrode him. The operators moved with silent precision, cordoning off the patient, readying the extraction stretcher, and checking air filtration systems. Every action was deliberate, a mix of medical urgency and military strategy. Sarah allowed herself one glance at Chloe. The child's wide eyes mirrored the stakes. Death could come in minutes, and the line between friend and foe was razor thin. With a single nod to Miller, Sarah signaled readiness. Extraction at St. Jude's was no longer a plan. It was the only option. And in that moment, with covert operations humming just beyond the hospital walls, with Project Chimera's shadow looming, the team moved as one. Every second counted, every heartbeat measured, and every decision carried the weight of survival. The corridors of St. Jude's were quiet, too quiet. Emergency lights flickered, painting the sterile walls in intermittent shades of red and white. Sarah's senses were on high alert. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak in the flooring echoed like a gunshot. She could feel the residual tension from the earlier extraction still humming through her nerves. Then it happened. The lights went out. A sudden absolute darkness swallowed the hospital. The beeping of monitors became the only guiding sound, their intermittent flashes casting brief, ghostly illumination. Miller's voice cut through the tension over the comms. "Power outage. Manual systems only. Stay sharp. Possible hostile intrusion." Sarah's eyes adjusted to the darkness, her heart beating steadily but faster than usual. Something wasn't random. She knew it instinctively. The power cut was tactical, intentional. Footsteps echoed softly from the upper corridors. Surgical scrubs, mask, cap. The figure moved with precision. Someone was blending in, hiding in plain sight. Sarah's training flared to life. The ghost team might have secured the building, but this was different. Chloe, behind me. "Now," Sarah hissed, guiding the child to safety behind a reinforced gurney. Her mind raced. The intruder had access to the building, knew the layout, and was waiting for the perfect moment. Miller appeared beside her, flashlight in hand, scanning the hall. "Cleaner," he muttered, just one name enough to send a chill down the spine. A ghost operative, surgical-level precision, specialized in elimination and sabotage. Where most threats were blunt instruments, the cleaner was a scalpel, silent, invisible, deadly. The intruder paused near the operating wing, surveying the emergency lights. Sarah's instincts kicked in. She could feel the subtle shift in air currents, the faint metallic scent of the surgical mask, the muffled shuffle of highly trained boots against linoleum. The cleaner moved like a shadow, blending seamlessly with hospital staff in the dark. But Sarah's mind, honed through trauma units and field experience, caught the subtle inconsistencies. The cadence of movement, the way hands held surgical tools with precision beyond ordinary practice. Miller, perimeter breach, third-floor wing," Sarah whispered, keeping her voice low but urgent. "He's probing, testing defenses." The ghost team operators responded instantly, their tactical awareness sharpening as they moved silently toward the threat. But the cleaner was no ordinary target. Surveillance cameras were useless in the blackout. Motion sensors had been disabled. Only human senses, trained, vigilant, precise, could detect the intruder. Sarah crouched near a gurney, heart steady but pulse racing. She reached for the tactical knife she always kept on her belt, feeling the cold metal slide into her grip. The hospital, once a place of healing, had transformed into a battlefield of shadows. Suddenly, a door clicked. The sound was faint but deliberate. The cleaner was near. Sarah's gaze darted toward the source, taking in every flicker of reflected light, every muted shadow. Time seemed to stretch as she calculated distance, potential escape routes, and Chloe's safety. Then she felt it, a whisper of movement behind her. Reflexively, she turned, raising the knife just as the figure in surgical attire passed within arm's reach. The cleaner's eyes, sharp and calculating, met hers for a fleeting instant. Recognition, assessment, and then, like smoke, the figure vanished into the darkness, leaving only the faint trace of antiseptic scent. Sarah exhaled slowly, keeping her stance defensive. "He's testing us," she muttered, learning, waiting for a mistake. Miller's voice came over the comms again. "Stay focused. He won't get the drop on us. Not while we're here." But Sarah knew better. The cleaner was patient, methodical, and lethal. One wrong step, 1 second of hesitation, and the operation could collapse entirely. Every nerve in her body screamed alert. The stakes were higher than ever. The patient's life, Chloe's safety, and the mission's integrity now hung in the balance. Outside the blackout, the city remained oblivious. Inside St. Jude's, every heartbeat, every breath, every movement counted. The cleaner had emerged, and with him came a silent promise. No one in the hospital would remain untested. Sarah adjusted her grip on the knife, scanning the shadows again. She felt the familiar surge of adrenaline and clarity, the kind that came only in true danger. The hunt had begun, and every step, every decision would decide who survived the night. The darkness had become oppressive, a suffocating weight that made every sound echo like a gunshot. Sarah felt the presence before she saw it, a sharp press against her back, a cold metallic barrel pressed to her temple. The cleaner, silent, precise, and terrifyingly calm. "Move, or she dies," the intruder whispered, his voice muffled by the surgical mask. Sarah's mind raced. One wrong move could end everything. Her body was tense, ready to react, but every instinct screamed caution. Chloe whimpered quietly from beneath a gurney, trembling but alert. The child's small hand reached for the emergency flare on the floor. Sarah's eyes flicked toward her, the surge of protectiveness immediate. No matter the odds, she could not let Chloe get hurt. The cleaner's grip tightened on the weapon. "One step and it's over," he warned. Sarah held her ground, forced to play the part of compliance while plotting her next move. She could feel Miller's presence somewhere nearby, the silent signals over the comms telling her they were ready. Suddenly, a faint laser dot appeared on Sarah's shoulder. The intruder was scanning, targeting, calculating. Every fraction of a second mattered. Her pulse raced, but she kept her breathing steady, every movement measured. Chloe's courage emerged in the smallest, most critical form. She crawled under the bed, pressing herself against the floor, and quietly reached for the small taser she had learned to operate in the ghost team drills. Her fingers trembled, but her aim was true. The cleaner's attention shifted slightly, and Chloe seized the moment. A quick, precise shock jolted the intruder, breaking his hold for a fraction of a second, just enough for Miller and the ghost team to strike. "Engage," Miller's voice barked, cutting through the tension like a blade. Operators moved in with synchronized precision, overwhelming the intruder from multiple angles. The cleaner fought back, trained reflexes clashing against superior numbers. Every move was calculated, but the element of surprise favored the ghost team. Sarah twisted free, adrenaline surging, grabbing Chloe and pulling her to safety behind the gurney. The child's eyes were wide, but there was determination there. Heroism in miniature, born from sheer will. The cleaner, realizing the operation had been compromised, attempted to retreat. But Miller anticipated the move, intercepting the intruder with tactical efficiency. The hallway erupted in controlled chaos, shouts, restrained violence, and the sound of bodies colliding with precision. Within seconds, the threat was neutralized. The intruder lay restrained, tactical cuffs in place, and the hallway returned to tense silence. Sarah exhaled, her muscles trembling from the sustained stress, Chloe clinging to her side. "You okay?" Miller asked, voice steady but firm. Chloe nodded, small and resolute. "We did it," she whispered. Her bravery, a stark contrast to the fear that had filled moments earlier, was undeniable. Sarah allowed herself a moment to process, keeping an eye on the secured intruder. The immediate threat had passed, but the stakes remained high. Project Chimera's shadow loomed larger than ever. The cleaner had been only one piece of a far more dangerous puzzle. The ghost team regrouped quickly, moving to secure the rest of the hospital. Sarah adjusted her grip on Chloe, ensuring the child remained shielded while still maintaining situational awareness. Every heartbeat, every step mattered. In that hallway of darkness, illuminated only by the emergency lights and the lingering flashes of tactical lasers, one truth was undeniable. Heroism could emerge in unexpected forms, from trained operators to courageous children. And for Sarah, every second had reinforced a lesson learned long ago. Survival required vigilance, precision, and unwavering courage. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as Sarah's breathing began to even out. Sergeant Miller had administered the antidote moments after the cleaner was restrained, and the binary compound's effects started to reverse. Her muscles loosened, the pounding of her heart easing from the relentless spike of adrenaline. General Davidson's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and commanding. "Hospital lockdown in effect. No one enters or leaves without my authorization. I want a full sweep of every corridor, every storage room. Do not underestimate the threat." The gravity of the situation pressed down like a physical weight. Even in the sterile calm of the post-conflict hallway, the tension lingered. Sarah's eyes scanned the hospital, now a controlled fortress. Black Hawks hovered in the distance, their rotors slicing through the cold evening air, while ghost team operators moved with silent, deliberate precision inside the building. Dr. Pierce, still reeling from the chaos, was guided into a secure room for debriefing. His arrogance had been stripped away, replaced by a wary respect. Sarah, seated in the adjacent area, watched silently as Davidson outlined the failures in protocol, emphasizing the consequences of dismissing trained medical personnel during crises. "You jeopardized your patients, Pierce." Davidson's tone was icy yet methodical. Chain of command exists for a reason. Trauma nurses aren't suggestions, they're essential. Had it not been for Lieutenant Avery's insistence, we could have lost more than a single patient tonight. Pierce nodded slowly, swallowing hard. The lesson, though harsh, was undeniable. He scribbled notes, recording every directive, every insight Davidson imparted, aware that his own pride had almost cost lives. Meanwhile, Sarah's attention remained on Chloe, who sat quietly beside her, clutching the small blanket the operators had given her. The child's earlier bravery seemed to have cemented a newfound resilience. "You were incredible," Sarah whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Chloe's face. The girl's wide blue eyes met hers, filled with cautious relief and quiet pride. Outside, the Black Hawk hovered low, its side doors open, rotors stirring the thin evening mist. Miller and the ghost team guided Sarah and Chloe toward the chopper, every movement precise, rehearsed, and necessary. Despite the relief that came with stabilization, Sarah's senses remained alert, trained instincts refusing to relax completely. Davidson's voice came through the comm one final time, cutting through the wind and rotor wash. Extraction is underway. Maintain situational awareness. The threat may not be over, but you've survived the immediate danger. Debrief and await further orders upon arrival. The helicopter's interior was cold and utilitarian, designed for efficiency over comfort. Chloe's small hand held tight to Sarah's, and for the first time, Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe, to acknowledge that survival had been secured, for now. But the weight of Project Chimera lingered in the back of her mind. As the Black Hawk lifted, the city's lights flickering below like distant stars, Sarah reflected on the evening's events. The cleaner's attempt, the poison, the near-fatal cardiac tamponade, it all pointed to a larger, relentless force at play. Protocols were not merely bureaucratic obstacles, they were lifelines. Ignoring them, as Dr. Pierce had, was a gamble no one could afford. Miller glanced at her briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the chaos navigated successfully. The operators had executed flawlessly, yet the unspoken tension remained. This extraction was only one chapter in an ongoing struggle. The world outside the hospital was still unpredictable, still dangerous. Chloe finally exhaled, the tension leaving her small frame. "Are we safe now?" she asked softly. Sarah squeezed her hand reassuringly. "For now," she said, her voice steady but carrying the weight of experience. "But always be ready. Danger has a way of finding us, even when we think it's over." The Black Hawk banked gently, the city lights shrinking beneath them. Within the cabin, the hum of engines replaced the chaos, yet the silence was a measured calm, not relief. Every operator remained vigilant, every second accounted for. Survival was never guaranteed, it was earned, and tonight it had been bought with focus, courage, and precision. As the helicopter ascended into the dark sky, Sarah allowed herself a fleeting sense of closure. The hospital was secured, the threat neutralized, and Chloe safe. But in the back of her mind, she knew the war against Project Chimera was far from over. The extraction marked the end of this night's immediate peril, but only the beginning of a longer, darker battle ahead. The night stretched endlessly outside, rotors cutting through the cold wind. Within the Black Hawk, a fragile sense of victory settled. But for Sarah, for Chloe, and for the ghost team, vigilance remained the only constant.